US President Donald Trump is making good on his promise to bring back coal into the US energy mix, and he's citing Australian coal as a great example of just how cheap coal power can be. And he's right. So, why then are Australians shutting our coal power plants down when they're such a shining global example of how good coal can be? Well, it's because we've lost our minds. But maybe, just maybe, us Australians are beginning to wake up to the fact that we need coal. State governments around Australia are now lining up to announce that they are extending the life expectancy of their coal fired power plants. And whilst it's not quite time to pop the champagne just yet and celebrate a full return to sanity on energy in Australia, the fact is these net zero dreams are being mugged by reality. Net zero is transitioning to be niet zero, and not a moment too soon. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like yourself to make sense of this crazy world that we find ourselves in. If this slow walkback of net zero targets in Australia feels kind of familiar, it's because it is. We've seen this same pantomime play out amongst car manufacturers around the world. It wasn't long ago that they were forming a conga line, taking turns in the spotlight, announcing their unachievable and frankly absurd deadlines for this mythical transition to pure electric power. All of them, from the Japanese giants to the Germans, the Koreans, and practically all of them, announced that the age of internal combustion was over. The future, according to them at that time, was made up of ever smaller internal combustion engines with fewer cylinders, smaller capacities, and ever larger battery electric setups to go with them. The goal was that by 2035, practically every new vehicle would be purely electric, with perhaps some concessions for internal combustion in long haul trucks and things like that. But that was only ever a fantasy. The industrial capacity needed to mine, refine, transport, and manufacture that many batteries simply doesn't exist, and it can't be built in only a decade. Not to mention to doubling the energy production capacity, to say nothing of all the additional batteries needed to store all this intermittent electrical power from solar and wind. The whole thing is nonsense from start to finish, but boy did the CEOs of these car companies love the fawning attention and the spotlight they got while they made these empty promises. Not to be outdone, Australian state premiers have spent the last decade trying to outdo each other, telling similarly outlandish fairy tales to their constituents, all about how we are going to be able to reach net zero by the year 2050. That we can build grid scale solar, wind, and the storage, and that somehow all of that infrastructure will lead to lower power prices rather than higher, despite us having to spend literally hundreds of billions of dollars to make that happen. And just like the CEOs of global car manufacturers who are now quietly walking back their absurd, impossible promises, and like BMW and Mercedes, who have recently announced plans for new V8 engines, now the premiers of various states are finally admitting in their own small ways that they have been mugged by reality, that they have to extend the lives of our existing coal-fired power plants, or else. Or else people might start to realize that this energy transition is actually an economic collapse. Now, before I go into more detail about what's happening in Australia, let me say that I am 100% viewer funded. I have no advertisers, I have no sponsors, and much of what I have to say is just too spicy for most advertisers in any case. So if you're getting value from the Topher Project videos like this one, then you'll really get a lot of value out of my first best-selling book, Good People Break Bad Laws. It's all about the role of civil disobedience in modern society. The sequel, Good Christians Break Bad Laws, also a bestseller, is about theology and civil disobedience and why Christians, contrary to what some churches and pastors preach, Christians should be quick to stand up against civil authorities when they overstep their God-given boundaries. Plus, there's my t-shirts like this very prominent Niet Zero design, which is a great conversation starter. Plus, there's lots of other designs, and some are funny, some are serious, but all are designed to make a point. Plus, you can get DVDs of my award-winning documentary, Battleground Melbourne, as well. And the bonus is that by buying my stuff, you're not just getting great books and great clothes, you're also helping me to do what I do. So grab yours at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. But the recent announcement by the Queensland Christopher Lee government that they are not only extending the life of one of their coal-fired power plants by 3 years, but are also going to review their entire zero emissions targets. Now that is a great step in the right direction, and it's the kind of announcement that we want to see spreading around the country. The QLD power plant, which was due to switch off in 3 years, will now switch off in 6. And I'd be willing to bet money that this date will be extended further when the time comes. This is the thing. These 2035 deadlines for full electrification of cars or the 2050 deadlines for net zero at a state level, that sounds fine when those deadlines are so far away that they allow for a bit of magical thinking, a bit of imagination. But as those deadlines loom, those people begin to see a little clearer the impossibility of the task, and it becomes too obvious. And good on the Queensland government for being one of the first to announce a review of their Renewable Transformation Act, which is the legislative bill that sets out these nonsense deadlines in Queensland. Not only that, but the Queensland government are allowing new gas exploration as well. Now, this again isn't a pop the cork on the champagne moment. There is a long way to go before we get there. And first and foremost, we have to dodge a federal minority government of Labor beholden to the Greens, because that could set us back terribly in the battle for energy reality. But increasingly at a state level, we're seeing a little bit of honesty sneaking into the renewable energy debate. And governments which up until now have been trying to maintain this fantasy of net zero by 2050, they're now starting to come clean about the fact that that is just not going to happen. They'll back off slowly, of course, one small announcement at a time. Don't expect to be popping the champagne in the next 2 or 3 years. But with Trump directing the US to drill, baby, drill, and getting back to coal in a big way, and with more and more Australians watching videos like this one and becoming aware of the futility of our own actions in a world where the Chinese are building new coal and new gas power plants producing more power than our entire electricity grid, and they're building that much new coal and gas generation every single year. Last year, again this year, next year, the year after, and so on. It's becoming more and more politically impossible to pretend to maintain this fantasy that Australia is going to save the world if we reach net zero. At a federal level, we've seen Peter Dutton promise to use increased gas power production to stabilise the grid in the short term while he builds his nuclear dream. And that's a halfway step in the right direction. Building gas in the short term is good because they are relatively fast to build, reasonably cost effective, although not brilliant on that front, but more importantly, they can ramp their output up and down quite quickly in response to the intermittency of solar and wind power. So gas is one of the best ways to stabilise the grid until this renewables fad passes and we can finally get back to being grown-ups and producing our power from Australia's vast reserves of brown and black coal again. But we're not there yet. Extending the lives of our few remaining coal-fired power plants is a far cry from building new ones. That's where we need to get to. But then again, when the car manufacturers started saying niet to net zero, they did that in small ways to start with as well. They didn't start by announcing new V8 and V12 engines. They started by just pushing back the deadlines and changing their internal quotas and how many of what was going to take what to manufacture, how many pure internal combustion, how many pure electric, how many hybrids. They began to just shuffle those ratios. They tested the waters first. And then, as each major manufacturer began to realize that all the others were in the same boat and they all needed to make these same horrible announcements, we soon got a flood of manufacturers completely abandoning their net zero electrification dreams. And just a few months ago, finally, we got the coup de grace, the announcements of newer and more powerful large capacity V8 engines from the biggest manufacturers in the world. Yay! That same dance is now taking place among our state premiers. None of them want to get too far in front and get criticised for abandoning net zero too fast, but they all know they need to do it and the clock is ticking. The outcomes of this newly announced Queensland review will give us a great insight into just how quickly the other states are going to walk back their impossible promises as well. But make no mistake, the tide has now turned, despite the desperate rhetoric at a federal level. And yes, sadly, there will be ongoing waste of more of our money on things like household batteries and net zero and all of that. That will continue for some time to come. But net zero is genuinely becoming net zero, and the signs are increasing all around us. The question now for people like myself is to see which politicians have the fancy footwork to survive the dance, the transition, the train wreck, and which politicians are going to end up going over the cliff and their careers going down with net zero. So whilst it's not time to pop the champagne yet, you should probably make sure you have some in the cupboard, because thanks to Donald Trump really going for coal in the US, the day is coming when we will be popping the champagne here in Australia too. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to make sense of the world as it changes around you. Like I said, I am 100% viewer supportive. So you can grab my Net Zero t-shirts, hoodies, along with books, DVDs, and other designs from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Please leave a like, a follow, and YouTube thinks that you'll like this video here, so why not check it out while you're here. Thanks for watching to the end, and as always, stay free.